Hi, my name is Robin Wong and I have here the Olympus Pen E-PL1. I've been doing some shutter therapy with this camera recently. I'm going to share my photographs and experience using this camera in this video. Let's do this! The Olympus E-PL1 was released in 2010. That's 10 years ago. This is the third micro four thirds camera from Olympus after EP1 and EP2. Both the Pen EP1 and EP2 cameras are premium Olympus Pen cameras. The E-PL1 was the first truly affordable micro four thirds camera from Olympus, targeted towards newcomers to photography, lifestyle and casual users. Bear in mind, at that moment, I was already shooting actively with Olympus DSLR cameras, E520 and E5. I've been using these cameras for my own shutter therapy sessions as well as for some professional shoots. I got the E-PL1 just because I was curious to see what all the fuss is all about. The mirrorless, micro four thirds. I want to see what Olympus is doing in their micro four thirds system, as well as just getting a small camera, a supplementary camera, whenever I don't feel like carrying the bigger DSLRs out. The E-PL1 makes much more sense if I just want to carry something small, light, and I'm not doing anything too serious. Considering that this Olympus E-PL1 was not my primary camera, I didn't really use this camera a lot. Over the years, Olympus have released much capable and improved micro four thirds system. Came along the OMD EM5 and EM1, which have convinced me to switch over fully to micro four thirds for my professional use, replacing the DSLRs. Because these newer cameras were a lot more capable, I haven't even been using the E-PL1 for many years. The last time I touched this camera was probably more than 5 or 6 years ago. Now, we already have E-PL10 in 2020, the 10th iteration of this camera. So just wondering, how is the original E-PL1 from 10 years ago perform today in the year 2020? When we look at the Olympus E-PL1 in 2020, there really is nothing to shout about when it comes to specifications. But you gotta bear in mind that this camera was released 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, the 12 megapixel micro four thirds sensor that is used in this camera was the best that Olympus has to offer. It's the same image sensor used in the E5 and E30 DSLRs. Now, the camera does have a lot of interesting features. It has built-in flash, it has an attachment to electronic viewfinder, it has built-in image stabilization. It does feature the super control panel. The back screen isn't really great. The resolution, I don't even know how much resolution was there, but it's not really good enough to judge critical focus. In terms of controls on the camera, it is very bare bone. There's no command dials. It is just mostly buttons. There is the mode dial, and that's pretty much it. The handling of the camera isn't great, but it's not bad either because it is a very light camera. The build quality is just okay. It is fully made of plastic. As you can see, over the years of abuse, the grid part of the body starts to chip away, revealing the inner plastic of the body. There really is nothing to write home about this camera. There's nothing exceptional about the E-PL1. It is a stripped down version of an Olympus Pen. If you can't afford the EP1 or EP2, the E-PL1 is a good introduction to the Olympus micro four thirds system 10 years ago. Having said that, I did enjoy myself tremendously shooting with the Olympus E-PL1 on the street very recently. I did come home with a lot of shots that I was very happy with. One thing I must complain about this camera is the autofocus performance. It was painfully slow. It takes about half a second or more to lock focus, and that is in good light. In low light conditions or in situations where there's very little contrast to work with, the contrast detect autofocus in the E-PL1, the earlier days of Olympus Micro Four Thirds cameras, was just quite poor. It is very unreliable. I have missed many important moments. I know I see the moment coming. I expect the camera to instantly react, but it just did not happen that way. And I think this has contributed to some of the earlier negative perception of mirrorless systems or Olympus Micro Four Thirds systems, because the autofocus was so unreliable in comparison to any DSLRs at the same time. Give a DSLR with the phase detect autofocus, you can instantly nail the focus with very, very minimal delay. That is just not the case with the E-PL1 or EP1 or EP2 or any other earlier Olympus Micro Four Thirds system. Of course, Olympus has fixed this. The autofocus has improved drastically, and when EM5 came and EM1 came, Olympus even dared to claim that they had the fastest autofocus system in the industry at that time. So yes, going back 10 years, I didn't really enjoy using that autofocus unreliably slow performance. Autofocus aside, in terms of image quality, generally under good light, I did enjoy the images that's coming out from the E-PL1. Typically from Olympus, the images come out punchy, highly saturated, very pleasing skin tones, very good contrast, highly detailed. Even the kit lens is really sharp. I have very little complaint when it comes to image quality, but I do acknowledge that having an older image sensor, the 12 megapixels from the first generation Micro Four Thirds sensor, this is lagging far behind what Olympus can achieve in the latest iterations. It does suffer in the dynamic range department, even a little bit of overexposed parts in the image. I find it very hard to recover in post-processing, and boosting the shadow part, it does introduce a lot of noise, which is a lot more than I could remember. It was that bad. So getting the exposure right during shooting was even more crucial using the Olympus E-PL1, and don't even start in terms of high ISO shooting. Even at ISO 400 and ISO 800, you do get a lot of noise already in the image, and the image does suffer loss of sharpness and fine details. So yes, the 12 megapixel sensor is really nothing great, and Olympus has made bounds and leaps when it introduced the 16 megapixel image sensor in the EM5, and of course the subsequent 20 megapixels in the EM1 Mark II and EM1 Mark III. These image sensors are improved so much more than what this 12 megapixel image sensor can do. Stay with base ISO 200 or 400 the most, you can get very, very good images coming from the E-PL1. If you want to get an affordable Micro Four Thirds camera, an older one, because you can't justify paying for the high price for the latest products like the EM1 Mark III or the EM5 Mark III, and budget is a very important restriction, then I suggest you don't go too far back to the E-PL1 or E-PL2 era. I suggest that you go to at least the OMD EM5 or OMD EM10, the first generation OMD cameras. And if you can go up to EM1, that's even better, because the OMD cameras have built-in electronic viewfinder. They all have very reliable image stabilization. The LCD screen is much better. The autofocus has improved so much, and they have the 16 megapixel image sensor, which is a huge upgrade from this older 12 megapixel in terms of resolution, dynamic range, high ISO performance, and everything about these newer OMD cameras, even from the first generation, was just many times better in comparison to the first or second generation, the older Micro Micro Four Thirds cameras. But if you really need to stretch your budget, if you are, say you're a student, you can't afford to spend too much on a camera, then if you really want to stay with the pen line of a camera, at least go for an E-PL5 or E-PL7. These cameras have the 16 megapixel image sensor, which is much newer, better LCD screen for visibility for you to compose, and of course much more reliable autofocus system. That's all I have to share about the Olympus Pen E-PL1. Do you have one yourself, or have you owned the camera before? Please share your experience using the E-PL1 in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. If you found my sharing useful, please consider buying me a cup of coffee, or you can contribute directly to my PayPal account. I'll put the links in the descriptions below on how you can do that. Any small contribution can go a long way and help me to make videos like this and publish them right here. If you have enjoyed watching this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing, and I'll definitely see you again in the next one. Until then, please go out and take more photographs if you can, and always stay safe and take care. Bye-bye.